we're live.
Great, thanks, Alex. Welcome everybody to Office Hours 17. We're going to, as usual, follow our sort of basic agenda with a few regular topics and then some maybe one or two topics of discussion later on. I don't have that much content this week, so if anyone's got anything they want to bring up, then please feel free to do so. Ideally, do so by putting your hand up and coming to talk. But if you really don't want to or can't do that, then feel free to drop any topics in the Office Hours chat. So we'll kick it off first of all with the ETH Node Watch. This one will take a bit longer today because we have some interesting work being done on the Aragon side of things. So I haven't seen any other client updates apart from Aragon in the last week. But also we did discuss Open Ethereum and the Gnosis client development team moving over to Aragon and sunsetting the Open Ethereum client. So that is that's officially announced now in a Medium post, which I'm just going to link in the chat. Oh no, that's my agenda. How do I link the article? There we go. So if you want to read about the announcement from our Open Ethereum client team moving over to Aragon, that's the Medium post. And in terms of Aragon, it's been really great to see the level of work being done in the Aragon chat channel, especially I'm seeing a lot of effort on Stake Machine's part around testing where we're at with Aragon, both in terms of performance and compatibility with for our needs, for the Graph node needs, and Chris from Torrential Finance as well getting heavily involved. So Stake Machine, welcome, it's good to see you. Would you be able to give us a sort of summary of what you've been working on and then maybe finish off with maybe some words on how we can all help you and what we might do to kind of make this a more formal thing between us and the Aragon team?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So basically, when I started to play with my automation grant to sync subgraphs, I noticed these trace graphs was lagging just exact 50 blocks from the chain head, and sync always was unstable, and lagging could be from 100 blocks away from the chain head. And when I found out that trace filter calls takes about 17 seconds, and Open Ethereum less than 100 milliseconds. So I got in touch with the Aragon team, and we found out that the problem was because of gRPC connection between RPC daemon and Aragon that added a lot of latency. And if you switch to interconnection mode, when RPC daemon reads directly from data directory, latency disappeared and everything started to work well. So also they had a problem with indexes that wasn't built at the end of the syncing stage, and they had to fix it and add some migrations to their database. So all indexes after the last release was successfully rebuilt, and now I think Aragon is almost ready to use with the Graph node. So the last part that we need to check is to compare if it's syncing the same data as Open Ethereum nodes do. So we just need to compare somehow what data was synced with the Aragon and what data was synced with the Open Ethereum. If there is no difference, so basically we can go to the mainnet tests with the Aragon nodes, I think.
So what was I going to say? Have you used the RPC testing tool that we've talked about before, in terms of comparing OE
No
output to Aragon output?
chance yet.
Yeah, that's a really interesting tool. Chris found it when we were having a discussion about, you know, where our Aragon was up to in terms of trace. I haven't run it against the latest version, so I upgraded to that version that fixed, you know, you mentioned there was there's some stuff missing from the trace database. I upgraded to the version that upgraded that and fixed it without having to resync, and I still need to test. But last time I did test, which is probably over a week ago, this tool, basically this RPC testing tool, will send the same request, or you give it a window of blocks to process against, and you give it an OE node and your Aragon node's RPC details, and then it will run those queries against both and then detect the differences between the two, and alert you on the differences. So definitely worth a look. It's quite a nice tool. It might be part of what we need. But I know that you've also been talking about, and Alex was talking about this during the week as well, do we need to go further than that and start looking at the actual database from, you know, syncing a subgraph on Aragon and syncing the same subgraph on Open Ethereum? Do we need to go that far in order to feel confident that, you know, there's no determinism issues between the two, you know, using the two different clients? What do you think, Stake Machine?
And the main purpose of going deeper is it only will affect initial sync. So after we have a nice speed with the Aragon, it's not so necessary, and probably it will take too much resources to integrate it so deep with the Aragon, and won't benefit much because after the initial sync, current speed of Aragon is enough to keep up with the chain head.
Right, and this is also, I think Alexei mentioned, or you mentioned, something to do with there's a BitTorrent feature coming in at some point soon. Is that right?
Aragon said that they will implement BitTorrent kind of sync for the stages this summer. So sync for the whole archive node will take hours instead of days.
Yeah, that's really, really exciting stuff in terms of spinning up nodes real quick.
Did they do any give any details on that? Is that going to be some kind of a initial sync that once it's flagged as, you know, caught up, that it reverts to doing it another way, or is that, are they going to be relying on BitTorrent sync somehow in the background constantly?
Didn't see any details, but also this technology will use for light clients. So basically, you can try to use light client, but with added latency to serve some last head.
I saw a bit of a discussion about this, and as far as I understand, the idea is basically to, much in the same way that Aragon does these kind of out of DB pre-transformations of the sync data to drop the disk IO requirements. It'll basically use the BitTorrent protocol to both seed for other peers and also, you know, download those kind of sync snapshots over BitTorrent, and then it will switch over to just regular sync mode.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's a compelling use case for BitTorrent, definitely. The idea of syncing those nodes so quickly is really quite an attractive proposition, especially with a decentralized product like BitTorrent. Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of really positive progress being made right now, Stake Machine. So in terms of performance with Trace, we're still quite far behind in that regard when it comes to Aragon compared to Open Ethereum?
As for me, it's pretty working solution already, because it may be 10 times slower, but it's less than 1 second. So until the lag is lower than Ethereum produces blocks, I think we are good to sync to the chain head.
Got it. So it wouldn't be as fast to sync from Genesis, but it is capable for now, given the block times, of keeping up with the chain head, in theory.
Yeah, so it's pretty fast in case I synced live peer with traces in a few hours, maybe 5 or 6, I don't really remember.
I think you said trace filter calls take a while. Is this like something to do with the software or how it interacts with hardware? Because I'm just wondering if you could, since it takes up obviously a lot less storage than Open Ethereum, I'm wondering if you could offset some of the lag there by increasing the number of nodes you run. You know, since it's got so much less capacity taken up.
The main thing is that all nodes will answer for trace filters with the same latency, so it won't progress you any further, I guess.
I meant if you like balanced across multiple. So maybe while you're making one call, the next one, you know, goes in round robin or however you set up.
Latency is added from inter-process communication, I guess, and not just from the load.
Yeah, I think also, you know, there's a synchronous dependency on one call to the next within the same subgraph. So yeah, that doesn't really help. But across many parallel subgraphs, that latency, you know, won't matter, won't prevent Aragon from answering the call relevant to the next subgraph. And yeah, Stake Machine, you know, did you do any testing about or kind of like quantification of the impact of switching from the internal RPC to the shared memory way of running it?
Yes, so Chris from Torrential Finance just switched from RPC to internal same page cache interactions, and it took from 800 to 100 milliseconds.
Awesome. Sounds like that's the way to run it. But that's currently not supported in Docker, as far as I know.
Yeah, Docker will add additional latency, so it's also won't be so stable as reading from data directory.
But I mean, I kind of played with this a little bit, and I can't remember the detail, but I seem to come to the realization that it's actually impossible to run the processes that way within Docker.
You can. There is the chance that we can ask Aragon team to make a number of coroutines as a setting, so we can make more coroutines instead of 50 like it's for now. And when we are running the batch requests, we're requesting about 200 transactions in a batch, and all this 200 goes only to 50 coroutines, and they add some concurrency, maybe some locks. So that's why you can't get stable answers, responses for such batch requests. But if we can make 200 coroutines, maybe latency will lower a bit.
So that's sort of a piece of development work or piece of performance engineering work for the Aragon team, right? So there's a couple of things I wanted to bring up on the tail end of this discussion. So we'll cover the testing piece first. So testing continues, I assume, Stake Machine, and assuming it does, you know, what do you need from the indexer community in terms of test data or something else in order to help continue this sort of relationship with Aragon in terms of testing, putting aside whether they'll actually have the resources to make the changes? What do you need from the indexer community? Do we need to do the thing that Martin was suggesting, where we list out everybody's setups and what they're testing? Is there some specific things you want us to run? I know you've done that in the past, but maybe we need to formalize it a bit more. Specific things you would like us to be running against our Aragon and Open Ethereum nodes. How can we help you in sort of pushing this forward?
So the best way will be to set up an Aragon nodes for each of you and sync all mainnet subgraphs, so we can check that each infrastructure will sync without any problems.
Okay, awesome. Now, I did commit that I was going to have a chat with Reem about the grant situation with Aragon. Reem, are you here? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it'd be good if we could have a quick chat. Hey, Reem, how you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime. Sorry, if you have any questions, feel free.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot a bit here. I really just wanted to DM you about this yesterday. But I know that there's something in the works. It was probably still under the TurboGeth name in terms of a grant for some funding in order to help with compatibility of the TurboGeth node with the Graph software. And I don't know much about it. I was interested to know if it's one that you know. I know you manage a lot of grants. If not, we can take it offline. Are you aware of that grant and where it might be?
I'm aware of it, and yes, I am also aware that they've changed their name to, I believe, Aragon. So we actually, Martine was the one that's done the interview for it. We have drafted up a proposal. I'm not hoping not to share too much information now, as we're just trying to get everybody on the same page. But it is something that we are looking very closely at, and I think as we speak right now, we're having conversations internally around potentially moving forward with it. But if there is feedback from the community around specific things that we should be looking for in regards to this grant, happy to take some notes from this call.
Very cool. I think the best way forward, Stake Machine, if you're interested, then maybe you, me, Martine can have an initial discussion about where the grant stands today, and then if there's anything that you feel could be added to it that would help with what we've talked about today, we can bring that to Reem. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I'm open.
That sounds good to me too.
Great. Okay.
I personally think that actually diffing the subgraph data, probably just the POI2 table to begin with, is a good sanity check. And I know that Ford has, really strong knowledge of the whole stack and can probably help us with a methodology around understanding any discrepancies that do emerge within the POI diff, so that we can actually figure out, if there is a discrepancy, what is the exact RPC call, where the result was different. So yeah, I don't know if Edge and Node can contribute some resource around this, or just help us to get to a point where we're all completely confident in Aragon, especially given that, OE is disappearing.
Yeah, so I've been, mostly for my own purposes, but building out some tool sets for, comparing POI tables, comparing entity changes once you identify a POI difference, and then doing the same for ETH calls. So I'll see if I can share that with you guys this week. It's just like some Python analysis stuff, but maybe that could be a good starting point to brainstorm on some more analysis tools to do comparisons between the different clients, or deep dive into POI discrepancies. POI differences are, as you probably all know, pretty hard to debug because they are a single point that kind of defines everything that's gone on in the syncing process of that subgraph. So there's a huge set of possibilities for where that's come from. So I'm happy to help you guys build out tooling and knowledge for debugging those situations.
In a way, this is the same tooling that you might use for arbitration, right, Ford? So I see the feedback, the level of feedback you guys are putting in the arbitration threads on the forums. It just blows my mind how forensic you guys are getting. And I imagine that probably takes a lot of time today to get to that level of determination about, why somebody submitted the wrong POI.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not easy. So I am, as I'm doing that, I'm trying to keep in mind like generalizing the tools that I'm using. So I'm not just using something for each specific investigation. So I have some things that I'll hopefully share with you guys this week. So just like a tool to compare, POI tables, make sure that and identify the divergence. And then another tool to compare entity changes once you've identified that divergence. And then another one to look at Ethereum calls, which are kind of the major points of investigation I've been going in when looking at a POI. And so I can share those with you guys and we can all have some better tooling around that.
Fantastic. I just see Chris has joined us. Chris, I'm going to give you the option to join. We were just talking about Aragon, and I know you've been involved pretty heavily. So before we end the discussion, I want to give you a chance to, if there's anything you want to add. We've talked about where we basically, Steak Machine was telling the story of what he's been doing with Aragon, and we're interested to know what you've been up to too. I know you've been looking at and Chris, I don't know what the technical term you use, but accessing the node in a different way to try and see if performance improves.
Yeah, I can share that now or later if you guys want. I was just working through it this morning, but yeah, I've been working with TurboGeth and Aragon the whole way, so through all the good and bad. But it's coming along now lately, so it's looking more good recently.
Absolutely. So I asked Steak Machine earlier if there's anything that would help you in terms of, from the wider indexer community, what would it be? And from his point of view, it was mostly getting everybody to start deploying an Aragon node and syncing subgraphs on the testnet so we can compare data. Is there anything else you would add to that you'd like in terms of support, given the amount of time you're putting into sort of, researching this node and battling with it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is knowing what the behavior is for the open Ethereum nodes, which I worked on trying to sync in and it just was taking too long in the cloud. But definitely having something to compare against what's the kind of golden setup versus what I'm working with. So if I say generate a POI or I'm seeing this kind of blocks per minute rate, etc. So trying to just debug that against what we consider like the kind of optimal setup. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then, as we're working together in that channel, if I kind of see I got this error, is anybody else like, no, I don't have that error, and then trying to figure out what's different. I think that's what we have to do. And I'm in the Discord for the Aragon, so I'd encourage anybody else who's working with it for the graph to join the Discord for those guys, because they're actually very active in there and helpful resolving issues, especially for our use case.
Yeah, it's a very special Discord, that one, I have to say, in terms of the level of brain power in there. They also do, I know they do office hours as well on Aragon, on very complex computer science topics. So maybe I know some of you here are very much into that and might be something you're interested in. In terms of open Ethereum nodes, I think we can probably get you access to an open Ethereum node, Chris, to help you as well with this. I'll get back to you on that in the DM.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Okay, that was probably a record for the Node Watch section. Is there anything else anyone wants to add to that before we move on to Repo Watch?
Can we have a quick recap about an issue when GraphNode exceeds the number of retries to sync the trace filter? Because when Aragon had an issue, it returned zero data for its trace filter requests, and GraphNode just after 10 retries moved along, and I guess it wasn't used as needed. So all the data in the subgraph database was empty, but subgraph was continued to sync.
I guess this sounds like the type of thing we need an issue in the GraphNode repo so it's tracked. Ford, would that be the right approach?
Yeah, I was trying to follow along specifically. So you got an error, but it kept syncing?
It had no errors, but it returns empty data.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, if you could create an issue on the GraphNode repo and make sure I or someone from our team sees that, that would be super helpful and appreciated.
Okay, we'll try to collect data from chats we already discussed.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, if that's it, we'll move on to Repo Watch. I wanted to at least make a passing mention. I'm sure everybody's seen the announcement, but Arbitrum, Ethereum Layer 2 solution has been integrated into the hosted service. Now, I was looking to get whoever has been leading that onto the call, but didn't get an answer back on who it was. Brandon or Ford, do you want to make any comment on, the meat of this? Has it been an easy task? Any comments you want to make on this new feature?
I personally don't have much insight into the work that's gone into that integration.
Okay, we'll leave it.
But I'm definitely excited to be moving into some of these layer 2s this summer. It's an exciting time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same on my end. I think Letter's probably the one that's been the closest to this work. Definitely, it's a lot easier to implement, these EVM chains at this point than non-EVM chains. I think a lot of the work for some of these integrations has been, I can't remember if this applies to Arbitrum specifically, but dealing with these chains resetting their Genesis block. So I know that's been like an operational challenge for a lot of our engineers, is just tracking, when they basically reset the history of the blockchain. But we're really excited about the Arbitrum launch and just in general. I think that the pace at which new chains are getting added. One thing I'll note is that right now it is on the hosted service, which I think with the API versioning GIP that folks have commented on, I think we'll be in a place, and hopefully in the not too distant future, where we can start talking about rolling out some of these things like directly to the network as a first step, or at least an earlier step in the process. And so we're not quite there yet, but I think we're kind of on that path.
Yeah, I agree that these things need to be in place before we start even thinking about other chains for the mainnet, just besides what we're already doing and plan to do. I also wanted to talk about resiliency features. I know, Ford, we've had a lot of chats in the Indexers channel over the last week or so around various different things you're working on. We've talked about the change to, detecting failed subgraphs and settling those immediately. That's coming in a PR. Is there any other resiliency changes, or PRs, things that you're working on you want to highlight, things that are sort of close to hitting mainnet?
That's the major one that's in the works. I mean, the other one I'd like to highlight that I think a lot of you are already aware of is a PR that got merged last week that updates the transaction management. It makes the handling of reverts more robust. So some detail is it calls the Ethereum node, makes an ETH call to get the revert reason. And then it uses that revert reason to then handle the transaction management. So this is a pretty big improvement over a simple code change, but a big improvement. And I noticed many of you have been seeing some erroneous retries. So that's wasting gas for you guys. So this will be an important fix to help that situation.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm looking at 11 pending transactions at the moment, hoping that they're going to clear out soon. but gas spiked this afternoon, so maybe not.
Another thing that that reminds me of, which I'll be checking in again the next couple weeks and working on over the next month, is preparing for EIP 1559, which will change the way fees are managed for transactions. So I'll be doing some research and making sure that either that's being handled well on the ethers.js side, which is the library we're using, or I might need to do some additional refactoring to make sure that the agent is estimating gas properly, and then handling congested situations properly.
Got it. My understanding is that legacy transactions will still be compatible, right? And from what I've read, does that mean that if there was no changes made to the agent and 1559 hit, then it would largely work as expected? Or is the gas estimation piece going to be quite critical when it comes to 1559?
I think the gas estimation piece is going to be pretty critical. But like I said, I'm starting deeper research on that right now.
Got it.
One point I'll add just on the robustness, I can't recall if this has already been mentioned, but EdgeNode also does have some planned work around hardening like the integration testing suite for GraphNode, including the upstream clients. That's probably not landing super near term, but it is something that's on our short-term roadmap. And so I think that'll also add a lot of value here in addition to some of the items that Ford mentioned in the indexer agent.
It could be interesting to see how that might apply to testing some of these ETH clients as well, because it's pretty closely related.
Great.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to close it there unless you had any other comments.
No, that's good.
Excellent. So just moving on, I have a couple of things left here. One, just sort of an update on where we are with mainnet. So simulations are running on mainnet right now. There was a failure for at least some of us. I don't know if everyone indexing has experienced this, but certainly on my indexer, the Audius subgraph suffered a fatal error at some point earlier today. And from a comment that Janice made earlier today as well, the Audius team have been notified. So I imagine that means that we should be looking out for a replacement subgraph to be deployed at some point in the near future. Probably worth noting for everyone who is indexing that I wasn't aware of this. My understanding is that if you can, you should close this as soon as possible. And if you end up closing it or wanting to close it after the current epoch, which is 172 and ends in somewhere, something like 5 to 6 hours, you will need to submit a manual transaction in order to submit a valid POI. Am I on the right lines there, Ford?
Yep. Yeah, I would. If you just use your rules to let the agent close it now, I think that would just work smoothly. But then in the next epoch, you can still do that with the previous epoch start block POI, submitting it manually, and then feel free to reach out and ask questions about that in the Discord, and we can help out with that. But I think a lot of the indexers are aware of that process already.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, Stake Machine, you mentioned earlier that this hasn't affected you. Are you running an Open Ethereum node against that, or an Aragon node?
No, it's affected me, so I found it and closed with the indexer agent without problem.
Okay. So seems like a global issue.
One thing I'll note here is that the correct behavior for what to do is partly specified in the arbitration charter that I think we've talked about in previous office hours. It's still has the snapshot poll live right now with a lot of support, but it is still being worked on. There's still improvements to be made. Zach, in some internal conversations today, actually raised some points around what the arbitration charter specifies for this specific type of event. And he should be posting something in the forums soon sharing these ideas, but I think he brought up some compelling points for why indexers might be favorable to let indexers continue submitting POIs and collecting indexing rewards even after a subgraph has failed, as in this case. So just something to keep an eye out for in the forums if you want to participate in that discussion, or if you have any strong feelings there.
So has Zach posted something, or he's putting his thoughts together? He's going to post something publicly.
Yeah, it's been over chat so far, and so he's putting something that we can discuss publicly together for the forums.
Great, looking forward to it. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like we really need clarity on this. Like, it doesn't feel right that, indexes can move ahead with behavior that has not been ratified in any way. And I feel like there needs to be a statute of limitations here, because if I can close a POI with a historically valid value sometime after the subgraph has failed, but I can continue to earn indexing rewards and not do any work, the incentives just don't add up.
Yeah, so I think there's two different points there. One was about just, will indexers be punished for, if the rules or conventions change as to what's correct? And I think the answer there is no. I would consider that almost like, the same as like if the graph node version changed, right? Like you wouldn't be on the hook for, the new subgraph API functionality if you were, running the previous functionality during a previous epoch. I would see sort of like the conventions established in this arbitration charter being similar, that like you wouldn't be on the hook for conventions that didn't exist, at the time, or that were different at the time. The charter also does specifically specify a statute of limitations for similar reasons that just, sort of through the passage of time, these things it becomes harder to pin down exactly what happened, at a certain moment in time, months ago, or exactly what the set of, rules and behaviors should have been. Right now, that statute of limitations, I believe, is proposed to be 2 allocation durations in the charter. That's something that we could discuss as well. On your second point, there's a number of reasons that Zach brought up, so I don't want to do his argument a disservice. I think one point that he brought up for why it might still be useful is that even for a broken subgraph, it could be beneficial to have historical like time travel queries from when that subgraph was still functioning. You could imagine a dApp that's relying on that subgraph that they still want their UI to be able to show something, even if it's not current fresh data. And so it should really be up to the dApp developer when they decide to unsignal from that subgraph and move that signal to a new subgraph. And that's kind of the indication as like to when that subgraph ceases to be useful to index. So that was one point that Zach kind of had there. Again, I think he can probably capture his thoughts better. But one other idea I came up with as sort of an intuition pump here is that in theory, you could deploy a subgraph that's trivially easy to index. Like you could imagine a subgraph that's like a no-op on every block. And someone could deploy that and signal on it, and indexers could allocate towards it. And eventually you would expect, the sort of profits, so to speak, to be competed away, because, every indexer can just kind of come in and allocate on it, and it's, trivial to index. And that's effectively the same as a broken subgraph, right? You imagine a broken subgraph, once it's in a broken state, it's a no-op on every future block. And so from that perspective, that kind of convinced me that setting special rules here for broken subgraphs doesn't necessarily add a lot if you don't have a way of handling that other use case that I just described.
I think one of the main concerns people have is around slashing. Like if there's no clear guidelines, like, oh, this continued indexing or something like this is only supported for a certain time period. I saw someone mention this in the chat somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable feedback. So yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I think all these conventions would be established already, and we could just say, hey, this is the set of rules. I think we'll be there soon. I think that's part of what we've been working towards with the arbitration charter and the GIP's process, and the recent community feedback. I don't think it's anyone's intention to punish indexers for that lack of clarity. So that's, I realize that there is still some implicit drawbacks. For example, the opportunity cost of missed indexing rewards. So I'm definitely sympathetic to that. I think we'll be in a state soon where there's a lot more clarity around what the expected behavior is, and I think this, is kind of part of that process of getting there.
Yeah, I think the things I've already seen happen around here have tell us that we do take quite a good balanced approach between rational indexer behavior and network integrity. So yeah, I think we're on the right path.
I think it's really important as well that, it's frustrating, obviously, that we can't have absolute clarity about all these things. But, because we don't have absolute clarity, we need as many voices as possible to be voicing their opinion on the charter and on the lack of clarity, so that we can cover things off that maybe, we might not otherwise see. We need a diverse group of people providing input to the charter.
Yeah, before we have something set in stone, it's only further transparency that's going to put people's mind at ease. So if anyone has any concerns, they should be speaking up about what their concerns are, and then we can work towards rectifying them faster.
Okay, so we took a bit of divergence there. I think I started off with the mainnet discussion on where we are with the migration phases and the audio subgraph failing. The other piece there I had was about testnet, just an update on where we are with that. There's much higher QPS running on the testnet at the moment, so if you're looking to do any stress testing on QPS, testnet is the place to be. I see Stake Machine and Chris have been doing some really cool sort of comparisons on different platforms and different configurations of infrastructure to see what sort of QPS they can get. So get involved and have a go yourself. All of this learning puts you at, gives you an edge when it comes to mainnet. So make use of that testnet QPS while it's there. Does anyone else want to talk about any experiences on mainnet or testnet right now? I only have one other sort of thing to talk about, which is a snapshot, and it was just more about just making sure everyone's aware that there's a snapshot going on. So anything else about mainnet or testnet experience right now? Okay, so last thing on my list of things to talk about was just to make everyone aware, I'm sure most of you are aware anyway, that there's a snapshot vote going on right now. The main piece of that snapshot vote is around the arbitration charter itself, and I guess ratifying the first version. But as Brandon says, that's still undergoing proposal, so there's still room to, get your opinions or issues with clarity to paper around the charter. Is that right, Brandon? We're not solidified yet. Is that the right word?
Yeah, that's correct. There's still room to make tweaks based on community feedback. This is something I tried to be a lot more explicit about in the wording of the snapshot vote this time, that it is a community poll, and the purpose of these is to really make sure that we're moving in a direction that the community supports. It's kind of doing a check-in. The intention is not that the exact version of the thing that goes into the snapshot poll is now set in stone, and we can't keep improving it based on community feedback. And so definitely vote on the snapshot poll. This is really just signaling that you support kind of the broad brushstrokes of it, but it doesn't mean that based on if people bring up points in the forum. This was, I think, the case for GIP2 that created some confusion, that people thought it meant that we couldn't keep improving the proposal or explore alternatives, but there's definitely room to have your voice heard, and like I said, there should be some discussion happening on that thread soon that I encourage you to participate in.
And this snapshot vote also covers a number, 3 other proposals as well. Is there any of those in particular you want to highlight, Brandon?
I can quickly just describe at a high level what they are, and maybe folks can kind of focus where their interests are. But the 3 main ones that it depends on, one is related to deterministic gas costs specifically for subgraph timeouts. So, subgraphs for a while have had these timeouts that have, just been using like a timer, which is very subjective across different indexer machines. And so we implemented gas costing in the WASM mappings, similar to what you would find, on like the EVM, or I guess, Polkadot, using WASM. And the goal there right now is just to be roughly correct for deterministic timeouts. It's not to be super, super precise. We don't have quite the same like DDoS vectors as like Ethereum did, for example, when it had like the Shanghai attacks from like all these, mispriced opcodes, because the graph isn't like one to many in terms of the work that someone is forcing you to do. But it is something where I see a lot of value in improving those in the future. But for now, it's just a rough approximation of what the gas cost should be. And you can check out how those are being computed in that GIP. The other GIP is related to separating slashing percentages for indexing and query disputes. This was really about mitigating the unbounded risk to indexers of serving an unbounded amount of queries in an epoch or during an allocation. And so just recognizing that the risk profiles of submitting POIs and serving query attestations are just very different, that those things should be able to be tuned separately. So that's one of the other dependent GIPs. And then the final one is around the subgraph API support matrix, right? Of what subgraph API features are supported for what protocol features. And we discussed this at length in the last protocol town hall. But I definitely encourage you to check this one out. It was really, I think, triggered in many parts based on indexer feedback around needing more clarity on what to do when you see a subgraph with certain characteristics deployed to the network. And I think, dovetailing on the conversation from earlier in the call about Arbitrum, it's also what sets us up to be able to more rapidly deploy new functionality directly to the decentralized network, as opposed to, Edge and Node's, hosted indexer being the first place where a lot of this stuff is tried out. So yeah, those are the kind of three high level descriptions, and feel free to find those on Radical and chime in the forums.
Thanks, Brandon. So the most interesting one to me beyond the arbitration charter is definitely about specifying canonical versions of the subgraph API functionality for various reasons. But the biggest one for me is being able to sort of measure the risk of deploying a certain subgraph, and then also knowing exactly what I need to have in place as an indexer in terms of my infrastructure or my software versioning or whatever, in order to make sure I can support it. So I'm really glad to see that, the first iteration of that coming to fruition. Does anyone else have any comments on that, on any of the snapshot stuff?
I think the differentiation of slashing amount sounds pretty interesting. I saw some good takes on that on the forum already, if I remember.
Ariel working on that one, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's been audited already. I think we just need to get it through the upgrade process.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw as well. Okay, well, that was my... Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it just kind of made me think of one other thing I just wanted to plug is just keep an eye out for updates to GraphNode. So Ford, you might have more up-to-date information on the rollout, but I know that there is a release plan for GraphNode in this somewhat near term. But then there will also be a release that includes a lot of this feature detection functionality, probably closer to the end of closer to like the end of the subgraph migration roadmap. And so I think those are being done in a way that, for the most part, you wouldn't be required to upgrade. But don't quote me on that, because obviously, like, we're still investigating some of these determinism issues, and there might be some break-in functionality in those releases. And so just stay tuned for updates on that.
Interesting. Thanks for that. That was the last thing on my agenda for today. We have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up before we finish off for today? Okay, well, thank you everyone who's contributed today. Good discussions today. And we will see you again next week for another office hours. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.